Uh, Good morning, afternoon, or whatever time it is as you're listening to this, our ninth podcast in a row. This is Earth Medicine Soul Care. My name is Oakwalker, and I'm here with my friend Stronghorse.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, just getting
So,
checked in. Oh,
Oakwalker, we kind of battled around about. We try to keep a thread going in terms of what we talked about the last time, and to pick it up again. And I think maybe we kind of jump off the tracks here a little bit, and I'd like to get into a little more of why we chose to do this and what the benefit has been to us in our lives. Because a lot of people um, are looking at this through their lenses in terms of what their exposure has been to a spiritual dimension or spiritual path, and some people are looking at it and they got no idea what we're talking about, and so I think one of the when we've titled this Earth Medicine, I think one of the biggest medicines that we need to bring to the planet this time is understanding,
mm-hmm.
because in this high tech information age, it's sort of put everybody on notice of you're supposed to know everything about everything. And if you don't, then fake it till you make it, and
Uh-huh.
it's created a high level of anxiety on everybody. And then, people, they get confronted with something they don't understand and they tend to get defensive about it,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's no doubt that the lifestyle you and I have chosen is uh, specialized, shall we say,
Uh-huh.
in this day and time. Now, if you go back several centuries, there were civilizations where, what you and I are talking about, it was the standard modality, and there's a lot of aspects of that we're trying to cover to bring that to people's attention to basically say, you don't have to be miserable all the time. You don't have to be anxious about, are you doing this right or doing that right? Or, what are my goals? That I was reading the other day where um, people who are involved in hospice say that the very number one thing that people say who are dying is, I regret that I didn't do enough.
Uh-huh. Wish I'd done
I
more
have
about.
regrets.
Uh-huh. Mm. Not sure how to morph that into what you just had me thinking a second ago.
Well, I think it's important for people to I think it's important for people to you're both physical and spirit. You are.
Hmm.
You and I know that. A lot of other people don't know that.
Yeah.
But you have to develop both aspects of yourself. You have to develop the physical and you have to develop the spirit. And so we're trying to say to people, here's some ways to give that spiritual aspect of yourself some consideration. And I think that, that's part of a lot of people's regret, because they know that they came in here as a spirit to occupy a physical body, and now those who are getting ready to check out, you know they have regrets because they didn't fulfill some of the things that they decided they wanted to try to fulfill by coming into here as a spirit.
Uh-huh.
And they don't name it like that. They may not classify it in that context, but that's true for everybody. I mean, it really is. So, um, part of the earth medicine is people need to be able to understand that they need to fulfill these both aspects of their self to discover their own medicine and discover their own authentic self.
Well, that's the key
Does
words
that ring
right
for
there. The authentic self part is the key word part. It's funny, just on the way I was walking out of one of the classrooms at work today, and this guy said, Mr. Oakwalker, you just keep being you. And off the spur of the moment, I said, I will, because nothing else has worked so far. And it was just an encapsulation of that very thing that I've, for me, being led down this path has meant that all the way down the line. And it has been a lot about, well, the shadow work helps us to get that other, uh, it's there's a self that is imposed upon us by our culture, by our parents doing their best work. They're doing the best they can, but there's a lot of this stuff that is imposed upon us that people think is necessary for us to become active participants in the world in a proper way. And that is entirely culturally based. There isn't any one way to do that. Um, but the shadow work that we do and the becoming our authentic self, that's what this whole process is about. It, it's
Right.
it's de-encrusting myself, becoming an unencrusted spirit in a body. I'm still a meat puppet with a spirit inside, but I'm a spirit that at least is aware of my surroundings in a much more profound way, and and a participant in this process, this 3D process that we call life on Earth, being on our Earth. And our culture is a very, 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 oh, three very, sorry about that, um, confused mass of ideas, especially now. And it isn't doing a very good job of keeping us attuned to those earth energies, those very earth energies that are going to keep us feeling good about ourselves and fulfilled and comfortable with our place on the planet. And
Well, and
yeah,
I think the words there you're talking about is decrusted, because, the I mean, you and I both know that before we came onto a shamanic path, we were crusted. And,
yes,
you know, which which man, we really didn't feel the energies or even have a reason to feel the energies. You
right.
know,
Didn't
we,
even
we
know they were there.
Yeah, there was no motivation to do anything. And so we were following the cultural guidelines. I remember, one of my friends back in the 70s used to have a t-shirt that says he who dies of most toys wins, And
Uh-huh. I always
and,
thought that was
and that's
supposed to
kind
be
of
sarcastic.
well, it is for us, but for him, he was serious.
Really?
That's the way he lived his life. Yeah, he also ended up dying from crack cocaine. So
Yeah,
there
he
you
didn't
go.
know irony
That's
when
for
he saw it.
Yeah. So I think, and this leads me, I think, into another really important point. And we've been hearing this for years, is the rise of the feminine. We're moving into a more feminine age and more feminine. And so I think, you know, there's a lot of ways that is manifesting. The ways that they manifest is of people working out their old woundings from the gender wars. It's not something I'm interested in detailing or getting into because I think that's a complete waste of time. For me, the feminine is the decrusting process.
Uh-huh. Coming to
You're
terms
able to
with,
see yeah, you're able to receive energies, and when that happens, you shift away from being a knowledge-based person into a knowing-based person.
yeah.
The more you connect into the energies of Grandmother Earth, the more you become decrusted, the more you
Hmm.
do shadow work, and you open up yourself to stuff that's going on all the time. It's going on all the time.
Yeah.
And you have to
Life
be
is never
sensitive to
ending,
be able to,
right?
yeah. But you got to be sensitive to be able to engage with it. And so I think that decrusting, I like that term. I think it's a way of allowing people to understand that and there's nothing, that's not like a derogatory thing to say to somebody. Everybody's crusted over with
Uh-huh.
stuff that culturally has been ingrained into our tiny little
Entire
bodies
psyche.
for
Yeah.
centuries.
Yeah.
Yeah, for centuries.
Exactly. And that's important too, that we understand that it is for centuries. It's I've been writing about this lately, and it's not my fault. It's not your fault, Frank Stronghorse, that you were raised in a culture that didn't know that energies existed. It's not your fault that you went through that phase like I did. I went through a phase in my life because my mother got sensitive well before I did, and I made fun of her. I literally laughed in her face about the idea that there might be these other energies running around. And she's doing pendulums. And I had the gall to stand there and consciously interfere with her pendulum demonstration while laughing at her. And my very interference in that process was an acknowledgement that the process was for real. So here I am making fun of my mother for trying to show me that a pendulum works. And I'm
Right.
literally changing with my own, mental power. I'm literally changing the demonstration and making it not work. And she looks at me and she goes, "Is that you?" And it was all real funny at the time, but here I am uh, uh, demeaning my mother over something
Validating
that
their
I'm
point by making
right, that I'm literally doing. So, oh God.
right, 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 right. Well, I think that, I mean, that's a really valid point too, in terms of, bringing it full circle, because that's emblematic of how a lot of people react to this stuff because they don't understand it. So they get defensive.
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
they feel like, well, you're making me look stupid, or I'm going to look stupid because I don't know what you're talking about. And that's a compounding energy, man, that continues to grow and grow and grow. And you
Uh-huh.
get to where people, they get together and they form peer group belief systems that, is basically like, we're not going to allow this other stuff to happen because we're right and they're wrong, you know.
Yeah.
But the fact is they don't have enough information to make that judgment.
Right.
They don't. They don't. And so, there's this polarization in this, battle of the wills. And
Hmm.
you know, most of us, people who have become semi-enlightened or semi-awake, we kind of look at that and think, what is your point, man? What, you know,
Well,
what are you even doing? Or what?
yeah. So
Go ahead.
that's a really fun topic for me because um, I have a layman's interest in quantum physics because fundamentally I believe seriously that uh, magic or these kind of energies can exist without some kind of metaphysical or physical, quantum physical, I want to say quantum physical basis for them to work, right? In other words, in order for all of these sensitivities, in order for there to be something for me to sense, then all this has to be working on some kind of a quantum physical level, right? And so it's like I talk about these things being magic because they do seem to be outside of a normal person's realm of experience, but I'm also talking to them about them being not at all magic because none of this could work if there weren't some kind of fundamental universal process that allows it, right? So there has to be, so the physics have to work. We just don't know what those are yet, right? But that makes me that guy who's going, well, yeah, the physics are that the earth, air, fire, and water elements are right there in an atom in the weak field, strong field, gravity and electromagnetism, not in those same orders. Um, but they're in, but they correlate, right? If all the spiritual traditions correlate too, then I believe that all the scientific traditions are eventually going to correlate. And in order for that to
Right.
happen, they're going to have to introduce the idea that consciousness has the kind of power to literally shape things and move energy, right? And if everything comes from energy to matter, therefore our consciousness has the ability to guide that process, however long that's going to take. And this is where I think the root of shamanism lies, is that we understanding all of these energies and also that they can be directed, um, like Black Elk in the last chapter of his book, he called in a rain cloud. Yeah, that actually happens. People can do that. And it sounds absurd to a person who can't believe in consciousness itself, right? And so you go out on these sites and all these scientists, quasi scientists are saying, yeah, well, we debunked all that because in order for that to be a real thing, then consciousness has to affect matter. And we already know that it does, but they don't want to believe that it does, right? So this is where you get to that point where you're saying these people who are constantly debunking, who are constantly denying, denigrating, and derogating the sensitive people, they build these walls around themselves. And that wall is literally the one thing that they refuse to believe that is the key to the whole thing.
Right. Well, I think the other thing that happens is that, and this brings us back to another topic we already discussed. I mean, I think the problem science is up against is that for you to really understand what's going on, you have to get out of the way. You
Yeah.
know, you have to remove yourself from the equation. And it's just like you said, you were sitting there looking at your mom's pendulum and using your mind to move it around. Well, that's the problem science has.
Yeah.
They're observing this and they've got a theory they want to prove. And
Hmm.
so, consciousness is working with them to assist them in their intentions.
Yes.
you know,
They're
and so they're
proving
like, well, this doesn't work.
they're proving what they already believed,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. For them to be completely objective, it's very difficult because they don't see that as being valid. However, that's the essence of what we learned in shamanism.
Uh-huh.
Get out of the way. Let the alchemy do its thing and you
Yeah.
observe it and then follow it where it takes you.
Yeah, which is the problem with science because they need to change one variable and then they have to be able to change that same variable over and over and over again for it to become a legitimate scientific theory or law.
Right.
And that process is it's extremely difficult to marry that process into something where you're just allowing spirit to flow because now you have more variables than you could put than we can even comprehend, right? And so even though I
Right.
love science and it's a beautiful process for answering a lot of questions, I it's going to be a long time before it has the chutzpah, the balls, if you will, to handle all of the whole what consciousness is. And I think it wants to go, it's going in that direction and it wants to badly, but uh it's handicapped because it needs to take such small samples of everything in order to make proofs.
Right.
But that's
Right.
kind of getting off
And I
the
think that therein lies,
go ahead.
as you say, therein lies the difficulty of proving the existence of God.
Exactly.
It's, God's saying, it's like, what do what do you, and they're like, well, you don't exist. He's like, okay, I
Right.
go.
And that's just, and that's another thing is that you can't prove a negative. I mean, you just,
Right,
you know, you can't say, well, it doesn't exist because I don't have any evidence that it does. Well, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means
right,
that you don't have any evidence that it does, right? And these very sensitivities that we're talking about, the opening, and after we do all this shadow work and all this shamanic decrusting and clearing of my spirit, of my own presumptions, of my biases, of uh, my ego, really. This is now the opening up of all of these new sensitivities that I need to know in order to be able to commune with that tree out my window, you
right,
know?
right. And I mean, I think that's a really good point. I mean, there's no difference between the way you choose to uh, uh, relate or engage with a tree and how you engage with God. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
there's no difference. There really isn't. I mean, if you're going to sit there and look at the tree and say, "Well, that tree doesn't have consciousness." I remember somebody on Facebook had posted this thing of somebody hauling off this gigantic redwood, and I put on there, I said, I said, that grandfather tree's got more wisdom than any group of people on this Facebook. And
Not
somebody responded back,
confrontational
says,
at
"Are
all.
you really serious?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd try to explain it to you, but no, I'm not going to do that."
It yeah, because something has to happen on an individual level. Okay. As a matter of fact, and it took more than one thing for me. It took that pendulum incident, for example, but it also took, I mean, one of the big things was there I was warming up to do my Tai Chi one day, and the teacher's going, just imagine there's energy leaving your fingers and it's washing up against the wall, and all of a sudden, whoa, I could feel it. It was like my fingers had more mass, right? And that now that there was something dragging them along as if I had attached ribbons to them or something, and I could literally feel it in my hands. I could feel it in my elbows. I could feel it all from my shoulders all the way down. And I realized that there is another form of subtle energy going on here. And I just felt it. And that was the kind of proof I needed. And I don't see a lot of people just walking down the street one day and going, Bing, oh, hey, I think I'll be a shaman because that sounds cool. Everybody needed to have some kind of an experience. Most of the people in my circles, for example, went through a period where they believed they were insane because suddenly uh, they could sense what another person was thinking or feeling, or they were they could tell that a dolphin was sad at SeaWorld. That was one of my
Right.
big ones too. I started crying at a dolphin show one day. Um, these things, um, the birds in the trees, suddenly it looks like they're looking at me and talking to me. It's not like, oh, hey, bird, there it goes. Now all of a sudden it's sitting on the fence. It's going, you haven't filled the bird feeder in a while, dude. Hello, hello, and this is a whole different way of looking at the world than just getting in my car and
I
driving
got
to work.
I got to share a funny story with you on that same note, about all the people feeling like they're crazy. This
Uh-huh.
shaman friend of mine one day called me up, and in all seriousness, he said to me, he said, "Frank, I need to ask you something." He says, "Do you think I'm crazy?" And I said, "Well, yeah, of course you're crazy. I mean, do you think normal people are out there having these conversations we have? No, they're not."
Yeah, what is crazy? I mean,
So,
and who determines? Here's they say the lunatics of taken over the asylum. I think they built it. They defined what
They did
crazy
build
is, and they're insane, right? So when you become crazy to the insane people, perhaps that's what becoming sane looks like. And there really is something to this. There's a kind of a comfort that I get from knowing that really this patriarchal colonizing culture that has stomped its way across the globe, killing and slashing and burning to take land and stuff. I don't think that's sane,
it.
and
No.
I think that we've been crazy as a culture for about, oh, I'm going to say 3 to 4 thousand years, maybe five, when we started all
Yeah,
of this
absolutely.
stuff, you know,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and I think that this shift that the planet is going through is shifting out of all of that very, very, very
Right.
old insanity. And that's why I love the process that I'm in now, because I don't feel insane anymore. I don't feel like I'm part of the normal
You know,
world.
you know, in our medicine journeys, we did a lot of work down in Palenque and Tulum, and a lot of these different power spots down in Mexico, and so in that, in that process, you tend to engage with ancestors. You tend to engage with, like for instance, in Palenque, we would be told go to these different temples, and then we'd come back and explain to the Nagual, like, well, here's what I think that temple's for. Okay. And he would tell you whether you were right or wrong or something. He would send you back or whatever. And like the temple of the Jaguar was for sexual healing.
Uh-huh.
By connecting to the stars, the power of the stars would come into the Jaguar temple. And so if someone, came to the priest back there during that time and said, I got this problem or that problem, whatever, he would send them to the appropriate temple for them to spend time to rebalance that aspect of themselves.
Mhm.
And so, you're talking about, you're talking about that sort of healing paradigm versus this insane thing that we got going on here where people they can lose everything because they got sick.
Uh-huh.
That's insane. I mean, it
Yeah.
is insane, and for us, when we know there's a better way and trying to convey this to other people that are thinking you're out of your mind. I mean, well, not really. One of us is, but but there really is an alternative here, and it is crazy making. It's
Uh-huh.
crazy making to be living in this time, and you have to do what you got to do to be able to exist in within the norms of this culture that says here's how you get rewarded. This is
Yeah.
how you survive.
Yeah.
What you got to do. All along knowing there's a better way, man. It's
Yeah.
just a better way. Uh, but I mean, it's the reality. It's just going to take a while for that to morph. But you're right. It's the energies of those ancient ways are slowly starting to seep into the consciousness of everybody. And
Yeah.
that is going, I think it's going to pick up a lot of speed here in the short term, quite frankly.
Yeah.
If you look at what's happened with this recently with moving into the age of Aquarius,
Yeah.
I think, we're going to see quite a rapid turnover of people's and a lot of people will flip out. They'll think they're going nuts.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
don't you think?
Oh yeah, I do. And I do. I also think that psych wards are going to change. They're going to stop, saying, well, you're crazy, and start saying, well, let's process down through what's bothering you now, and maybe we can work you out of this. I think that there's going to be a shift there as well, because I don't think everybody who's in a psych ward is crazy. Some are. I mean, some are people who definitely should be uh, kept away from society, at least, until they can get healed. But I do think that healing's possible for just about everybody. The vast majority of people can be healed if there's the will to do so. And they have to have it too. You can't heal somebody who doesn't want it. That was a hard lesson for me, trying to heal everybody.
Right. Well, I think the morphogenic field has to be able to be at a state of knowing, so
Uh-huh.
that that's those energies that alchemy can be created, so that the healing starts happening natural for everyone, as
Mhm.
opposed to, like you said, people asking, what do I need to do? And it's often referred to as the 100th monkey theory.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that's going to. I think we're pretty close to it, quite frankly. I
I
think we're getting
agree.
there.
Yeah, I do too. Anyway, we have run out of time. Let me thank everybody and let them know that we have a new website. It's earth-ems.com. And we're opening that up as we speak now. And we're going to use that as a place for you all to touch base with us as we move on forward through this process of becoming novitiate podcast guys.
Okay.
I want to say thank you very much to everybody, and don't go away.